So currently, not only is the famous hero Iron Man not himself and as well somewhat more of a villain now, he is even fighting against his own self. As you see, Tony Stark now has an artificial intelligence version of himself masquerading as Iron Man, and these two figures come to blows. Because as we do see these two figures come face to face, Robot Stark and Tony Stark, we then see what the situation is. Because you see, Tony Stark, the human one, uploaded his digital consciousness as a backup plan, a contingency 8 years ago. And now with this normal Tony Stark being, well, different and changed, his contingency plan came to life. And now with these two figures standing face to face, the now Robot Stark is planning to replace the human Stark, deeming him too far gone and needing to be taken out. But the human Stark goes to try and make his case, saying, wait, hold up, just like that, everything I've been working for in the last 8 years cast aside? Because yes, the Robot Stark goes on to explain that looking all into the questionable things you have done in that time, I don't think anybody will miss the Tony Stark of the last 8 years. Because Tony, as of now, has not only fought against other heroes such as Daredevil, but even has almost completely taken over San Francisco and infected the population with a techno-organic virus, literally able to control their bodies at his own will. But as these two figures are in the middle of arguing, we then see Tony Stark, the original, put on a smirk because his Endo-Sim armor, which is a very symbiote-like fluid but still very strong piece of technology, is coming to the rescue of Tony. And this thing is pretty powerful, being able to change its shape at will, increases power, and at the time of this being published, was one of Iron Man's most powerful suit to date. So the Robot Stark then has to make a decision, either stand here and get destroyed by the more powerful armor, or switch up its game plan, as it literally starts to take itself apart, deconstructing itself, and forcefully attaching itself to Tony. Because this Iron Man suit has the consciousness of Tony, albeit 8 years younger, he is still very intelligent and has come up with plans to take care of this new powerful armor. As once he fully encases Tony, he then starts to take him on a little bit of a joyride, a little bit of a trip, flying at high speeds, not only being able to blitz past this new Endo-Sim armor, but out of the building and into the sky, slowly making its way into space, with of course the Endo-Sim armor being right behind him. And of course, this armor being the Mark II, a way outdated armor in any sort of combat scenario compared to Tony's newer ones 8 years later, it wasn't originally built to fly in space. It wasn't until the robot Tony made some upgrades, as because he is every bit of intelligent, smart, cunning, resourceful as the original Tony. As we see, this Robot Stark's plan isn't to outfly, isn't to get away from the armor, but bait it, because the Endo-Sim, this now symbiote-like armor, has a small bit of consciousness inside of it. But that's not to be confused with intelligence. It has consciousness in the same way that a small baby would, as in the suit will always keep coming for Tony, always trying to connect that link and reform with Tony, even into places like space, where it's not explicitly built to go. Because this was the Robot Tony's plan all along. As he uses his repulsor beams to blast it apart, he makes note that some place like space where there's no oxygen, the Endo-Sim armor can't fire its jets, can't reform, can't follow back after them. And so with that, Robot Tony continues to kidnap normal Tony, flying him through space to a very specific location. A satellite, well, presumably a Stark satellite, but a giant one nonetheless. And as they are on there, we see Tony Stark thrown on and hooked up to a table. And here's where things take a little bit of a turn. As you see, the original contingency plan, if Tony Stark ever went bad, ever got mind controlled, ever went off his rails, was for his previous 8-year younger mind, if you will, to come in and try to fix whatever happened to the original Tony. But this now Robot Tony has a little bit of a different plan. He doesn't just want to correct this Tony, he is going to try to replace him fully, take his place, get rid of the original human Tony, one that seems to have gone bad and is almost without redemption, and fully become the only Iron Man. And as the artificial Tony is hooking him up to the machine, they then get a little bit of a visitor from Pepper Potts, who is back on Earth, as of course his artificial Tony and Pepper Potts are working together to try and stop this new superior Iron Man, superior Tony Stark, from continuing to do his wrongdoings. But Pepper herself doesn't know of artificial Stark's new plan to fully replace Tony. And even normal Stark makes note of this, saying, you should probably know that me from 8 years ago is having some pretty confusing thoughts about you inside of his robot head here. As you see, replacing me doesn't necessarily mean you get a better model. Do you really think you can trust this Tony? But before he can continue his line of thought, the connection gets severed. But the damage is done. He put the thought into Pepper's head that can Tony Stark, regardless of where he is in the timeline, even be trusted? Because as you know, Iron Man was never really a Superman type superhero, the goody two shoes, someone that anybody of all ages would be able to look up to aspire to become. Now, Tony Stark, of course, is a hero and in many ways very heroic, but he isn't above getting his hands dirty when the time needs to, or coming up with plans that may not be, well, the best legally or morally. Prime example of this is his time with the Illuminati, the secret shadow Marvel group of many different figures from the universe. But as we cut back to the satellite where we see the two Starks continuing to argue and talk, we then see the human Stark try to compromise, telling the robot version of himself that if you've decided to replace me and hide it from Pepper, at least let us talk about it first. You should know my vision before you decide to destroy it. Destroy me. You plan to enter my mind, so do it. Come see things from my perspective, because the reason why artificial Tony brought real Tony Stark to the satellite, because the equipment there was for Iron Man, which going forward I'm just going to call him AI Stark. You know, artificial intelligence, basically what he is. AI Stark was planning to enter his mind to get any information he can before, well, putting it frankly, killing this current Tony Stark and replacing him for good. And so with them both hooked up to the machine, they then enter Tony Stark's mindscape, which of course him being the superior Iron Man now, is a bunch of the worst aspects of Tony amplified. None of the heroics, more of the party side, more of the wild Tony Stark, and not the heroic Avenger Stark. But while they are here, he then goes to try to explain and ultimately distract AI Stark by telling him his ultimate vision and plan, saying science says Earth is at a tipping point. The world is rejecting us and we don't have long. I can't save everyone, but I am going to give people tools to defend themselves. But there is no way to do this completely smoothly without casualties. He needs the world's media to believe he is doing a good thing, believe in the cause he is providing, and to spread the message. But of course, Tony, knowing that not everybody will want freedom because that would mean giving Stark complete control, he even notes that opposition will have to be dealt with. And some will be left behind and ultimately taken care of, meaning destroyed, murdered. And of course, AI Stark sees through this, saying his plan to quote-unquote save the world includes a massive global death toll. And yet, Tony Stark doesn't shy away from this line of thinking. If anything, he embraces it, saying a statistically small number of people will be sacrificed so that the rest of us can have a higher quality of life. And as AI Tony tries to further fight this line of thinking, something starts to happen to him. He starts feeling weaker, as because unknowingly to him in the outside world, piece of the Endosim armor was able to make contact earlier from their battle and find its way inside of this robot Stark suit, compromising it from the inside out. As I've explained before, each piece of the Endosim armor does have a little bit of consciousness, and so with it completely shutting down and destroying AI Tony, the real Tony takes his time to free himself with a new conviction, knowing that his now current enemy is not only the people who stand against him from perfecting this world, if you will, but also a younger version of himself. He now knows what he has to do, and he isn't going to allow anyone in his way to stop him, even people he may have previously cared about, such as Pepper Potts. And speaking of Pepper, we then come back to Earth, where we see her not only confused about what happened, but questioning where she stands with Iron Man or Tony Stark in general, whether it be with the normal original human Stark or even the artificial intelligence Stark. But she doesn't have to question for long, as just then she then gets another video call from Tony Stark, which looks to be the robot artificial intelligence Tony. But to no surprise, it turns out it is the human original one, as we've just seen the AI one get obliterated. But Tony basically calls in to gloat almost, telling Pepper that it's over. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on whose side you're on, Tony Stark is a genius, whether it be from him 8 years ago or him in the present, meaning that the AI Tony wasn't completely destroyed, as because his other AI Tony is, well, not real and an artificial intelligence, it can be backed up on multiple suits and servers, meaning no matter how effectively Iron Man may destroy him in the present, his entire program is stored somewhere else, meaning he can just pop up again in a new armor, in the Mark 8 silver suit, I believe. And Pepper Potts, being fed up about being lied to and only being told half-truths, she then wants to get the full story. And as she does, she is rightfully so angry, telling the AI Tony that the original plan was to undo whatever has been done to Tony. AI Tony was supposed to save the original, not destroy him and replace him. But of course, this artificial intelligence goes on to say the plan has changed. Pepper, there is no saving him. I have been inside of his mind. You couldn't even imagine how far gone he is, what he is capable of. He is truly sick. There is nothing he won't do to see his vision realized. And of course, with most of this being true, the real Tony even agrees, saying, well, yeah, that's true, and you're in my way, so I guess I have to remove you myself. As the final battle begins, Tony versus Tony, two genius level characters with extensive resources and combat armors and weapons are given prep time to prepare against each other to go into full all-out war. And the first thing the real Tony does is go and collect his Endosim armor, which of course is his most powerful asset in his inventory, so it's no surprise that he has some things in store for it. And you might say, well, why is AI Tony even giving the real Tony time to prepare, time to regroup? It's because, as you may know, Superior Iron Man infected the entire city with his Extremis virus, a techno-organic virus that, well, infected the water supply, infecting everybody, and got everybody addicted to it. And he just threw a public party at Stark Island, meaning he is surrounding himself with innocents. So if AI Tony is to make a move, it is going to be very hard with innocent bystanders nearby, essentially a giant human shield. But this prep goes both ways, as it now gives AI Tony time to prepare too. But of course, as I said, at Stark Island, we see here a massive party is going on, which we see possibly hundreds of innocent bystanders arrive and take part in, including Tony himself. He indulges himself in the party lifestyle, as because afterwards, he is going to get down to business. And speaking of afterwards, we pick up in the evening, and after all of the shenanigans and party went down. And now with that out of his system, Tony, who is drinking again, and famously has been an alcoholic before, is ready to do his best work to put his plan into action. As you see a little side-by-side comparison of the two different Tonys, one real, one being an artificial intelligence, preparing, planning, scheming to get their hand up on each other in a go head-to-head. As you see the next day, Pepper and the AI Tony finally figure out what the original Tony is planning to do. You see, he had a plan called Biomark 1, which essentially boils down to biosuits. You see, the idea was you could land in any active war zone, and if you have the right resources, instead of fighting with bullets, bombs, and destruction, you could harness the people themselves. As you see, the technology is manipulating different electrical impulses, meaning with it you can take over the minds, the bodies of civilians and soldiers, using them like literal drones. The idea was to use this technology for peace. You could win entire battles, wars, without a single shot being fired, but that violates, multiple basic human rights in the process, so Tony never did it. It was immoral. So the idea was scrapped and never fully realized. But with this now superior Iron Man now, well, being a little more loose and fast with his definition of hero and his morals, Tony finally decided to put this plan into action. And as you see AI Tony rocketing off to Stark Island to finally see if he can stop Tony before doing something he might regret, we see it is too late. Tony Stark, the billionaire genius with almost unlimited resources, has did it. He has succeeded in this plan. So not only did he gather all the people here to party, but to actually be a giant shield, controlling seemingly hundreds of people with just a thought in his head, playing God with the lives of everybody in San Francisco, and if Tony gets his way, soon the entire world. But of course we leave on this cliffhanger as this video comes to a close. If you've enjoyed, leave a like, or subscribe to the channel if you're new and like this type of content. As always, this was the Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.